Welcome to the English Department's Career Day, a collaboration between the Career Development Center and the English Department here at St. Joe's. My name is Scott Rappaport, and I'm an Associate Director in the Career Development Center. Throughout the day today, as some of you well know, we've invited alumni to join us for conversations about their careers in order to give you insight into a wide range of career paths. Different industries, and get advice how to enter and thrive in some different fields. These sessions are being recorded, and later on, probably early next week, we will have them up on YouTube. So if you've missed anything today and want to catch up, you'll be able to go to the Career Development Center's YouTube page and see all of our videos. Our guest today is Kelly Farber. Welcome, Kelly. Kelly graduated from St. Joe's in 2009 with a degree in English and a concentration in writing. Kelly is the owner and scout for KF Literary Scouting, a boutique New York firm providing full scouting and consulting services to some of the most exciting book publishers from around the world. After working at the Gurnet Company, Sterling Lord Literaristic, and Barbara Trolley and Associates, she went on to found KF Literary Scouting in 2013. She's joining us from London today. So thank you, Kelly, so much for being here with us. And I'd like to virtually welcome you back to Hawk Hill. So
I wish I was actually on Hawk Hill. I actually haven't been back in a while. I know you guys have been doing some exciting things there, and the campus is like more beautiful and large and awesome than ever, but one of these days I will get down there and do some events for you guys in person, hopefully.
Well, you'll definitely have to get back and pick a day warmer than today. It's cold out there today. So thank you so much for being here. Kelly, I have 12 questions that we've kind of put together. We're asking these questions of all of our different guests today, and we're really doing that in large part so that students can get a different sense of what career paths would look like and see some of the same things throughout the day. So I'll go through those questions. I might ask some follow-up. Again, for our audience, a great way to watch this is if you put it in speaker view, you'll be able to see both Kelly and myself, and also make sure that you are on mute. If you have questions that come up, feel free to put them in the chat at any point. That I will get to them later on. You'll also have the opportunity later on to come off of mute and ask a question if you have one. All right, so Kelly, let's get started. Can you describe your current role, the core responsibilities, and what a typical day or week looks like for you?
So I think there's two sides to my life. One side is that I'm a literary scout, and over the course of this conversation, I will definitely describe in detail all of the things that go into being a literary scout. But the other half of it is that I'm a small business owner. So there are a lot of less glamorous, maybe more boring, but ultimately unique and challenging things about that. But to start with the scouting part of it, which I might be the most pertinent for you guys as English majors, basically what literary scouting is it's a vein of consulting that takes place in the publishing industry specifically. We are representatives of a number of publishing houses, but also in some cases film and TV studios, to find them books that would be interesting for their purposes. And what that actually looks like in practice is that the publishers that I work for translate books from America and from the UK into their markets. And it's my job to find them those books and evaluate those books for them, since they're not present in the United States and don't necessarily know our market or our authors. So it's different than a literary agent. Literary agents represent authors directly. Who I represent are the publishers, so I'm kind of on the other side of the transaction. Scouting is known for being a job where you read all the time, but since I'm in charge of the whole company, I do a lot more than just read all the time. I think the people that work for me are doing more reading than me probably at this point. They read about 5 to 6 books per week for our clients. I probably read more like 2 or 3 at this point, because I have to handle all the like forward facing stuff and all of the like back office stuff. So yeah, that's basically how to think about it. Is I am an international liaison for publishers, and my company represents 19 publishers and 1 film and TV studio.
Sounds like it is a very diversified career that's taken you to a lot of neat places.
Yes, I've traveled all over the world, and that never, I mean, during the pandemic, I didn't really get to. I was telling them that before I got on the call. So I'm actually right now on my first real official work trip since 2019. But in the before times, I used to travel for about 2 months out of the year.
Great. Kelly, can you tell us, like, when did you know that this was a career path that you wanted to pursue, and how did you get there?
So scouting is so niche, it's so small. There are so few people that do it. And so it's not something that you would necessarily be exposed to in college. And even in the beginning parts of your career in publishing, you probably would not be exposed to scouts because there are just so few of us compared to the number of literary agents, the number of editors, the number of publicity people, marketing people. Like they're in publishing in droves. And then there are just like this small little hidden pocket of scouts that are kind of off to the side. So it's not like I went into publishing knowing that this was what I was going to do. It developed over the first few years of my career. The short version of the story is that when I graduated from St. Joe's, I left Philadelphia. I went to New York. I started interning at a literary agency, and um, it was not a fruitful time for employment in probably any industry, and it was definitely not one in the publishing industry. The year was 2009, and um, crisis was around every corner, and books were definitely feeling that. So, you know, my mindset at that point was basically to work in any job in publishing that I could get, and that's still my advice to people now. Is just like get a job if you want to work in publishing, and then figure it out later. But the job I eventually did get, the full-time job I ended up getting, was within a rights department at a literary agency. And that is basically the department that is there to service the international rights of the author within the literary agency. So I was working on like the international side in my first job. That wouldn't have necessarily been what I would have chosen if you had given me the choice. But part of that was just I didn't know anything about that, and I didn't know that it existed. But once I started working with publishers overseas, selling the rights to the books that we had at the agency, I really loved that more so than the American side of publishing. So in that role, I was interfacing with scouts, and basically I felt like they were having more fun than me. Like they were traveling all the time. They got to read everything. Like they just seemed like a lot cooler and more intriguing than what I was doing. So after a few years, I left my rights job that was just kind of working on a very discrete set of books, and I jumped over to scouting, working for someone else. And I just fell in love with it right away. I loved how wide it was. I loved how much of the world it exposed me to. I loved all the different kinds of books that it exposed me to, because basically my job is to read everything. My job is to be in the mix on everything. And that makes it very exciting. So day to day, it's like any kind of book is something that I might read or hear about. And I think that that made me just so much more excited every day and engaged. So that's basically, that was the beginning part of the story. I spent a few years working for another scout and learning the trade under her, and then made the potentially insane decision to leave working for her and start my own business. And that was almost 10 years ago, and it's worked out. But I definitely didn't know anything then about owning a business or anything like that. I had just started really learning the ropes with scouting.
Cool. Well, it sounds like that potentially insane has led to some sanity and some good stuff. So, so my next question, and you kind of talked about this a little bit, but my next question that I've written down is a typical career path for an entry-level associate within your organization. But I guess if you can talk more broadly to current day, right? You mentioned it was 2009, and it was a tough job market. But right now, if somebody wanted to get into your field or something that might lead to where you are today, what recommendations would you make?
I mean, so things have changed a lot in the 13 odd years that I've been out of school, but also they kind of haven't in a lot of ways. I think that first of all, I've helped a lot of people from St. Joe's and from Philly who wanted to crack into publishing do it. I mean, you, beyond just having me on this panel, you could have a lot of other people that I've like helped kind of move through. And I think there's this idea that getting into publishing is super intimidating and hard, and it's not. Like you know, it helps to know somebody, but I think especially right now, um, we're really open to bring in new people. And I think it's even easier than ever because you don't necessarily have to live in New York anymore. Like everybody's working remotely. I think publishing's been pretty resistant to come back to the office. So I think that the barrier to entry has like never been lower. But if you want to prepare yourself for a job in publishing, I think the thing that biggest disconnect between college and getting into publishing is that in college you read old books all the time. You're rarely reading anything contemporary. You don't really get exposed to who the contemporary authors are. And the biggest thing you can do to help prepare yourself is like read what's actually coming out, read what's actually being published now. In your free time aside from your studies. And I think that like having a fluency with what is actually on sale and who's actually selling and who's actually writing is a big thing that you need in between. But as far as cracking into the industry, I think that there's a real need right now for strong entry level employees. I think the pandemic shook a lot of things up. I think the biggest advice that I always give people beyond the reading thing is like, be willing to have a weird, maybe not ideal job for the first year or two, just to help you get the lay of the land in the industry and figure out what it is that you actually do want to do. Because I think that people think, oh, books, editing books, you know, and it's actually so much more complex than that. And it's only once you kind of get inside of it that you can ascertain like what it is that you actually would be good at within the realm of working with books. So I think some people are like, I don't want to work in publicity, I don't want to work in sales, I don't want to work in rights or whatever. But it actually, any first job in publishing is going to teach you so much. And once you have one job in publishing, it's super easy to get more. So you just kind of have to get that first foot in the door, and then things can fill in really easily from there.
Kind of that's a theme from I think some of our earlier sessions too, is get your foot in the door no matter how you do that. And just because your foot is in the door in one specific place doesn't mean that that's where your entire career is going to live.
Yeah.
There's it's a lot easier to move around once you get there. So that's great. What do you enjoy most about your profession and what you're doing, and what's something that you would like to change if you could?
Ooh, okay. Well, first of all, I really love working for myself. That's like been a real lesson to me, is that in the first 4 years that I was in publishing, I was working for other people. And I'm so much happier now that I'm not, because I really get to be in this industry that I love on my own terms. And that feels really good. Of course, I couldn't have done that from the beginning. I needed to get the initial experience and make the initial connections to be able to like branch out on my own and do that. So I'm not saying that anyone should like leave college and start their own business. That's like a very risky, bad idea. But I think if you do have an entrepreneurial side, like nurture it, because I think that's been one of the happiest things of my life, is getting to do all of this on my own terms. And I don't think I'm necessarily like a corporate person. That's another thing I've learned. Like, I don't think I would be happy working in a big corporate structure. Some people are, but I don't think I would have been. So that's been a real like lifeline for me, is being able to do all this on my own. But as far as the actual work of publishing, I love the feeling that I get in my job when I get to read something completely new that I've never seen before. I kind of like am always chasing that high of like finding something that's just like totally, you know, blows my socks off. So I think that that's the thing that keeps me like falling in love with the job over and over again, is like a couple times a year I read something that's like genuinely paradigm shifting for me, and that makes it all worth it.
Nikki, I'm going to ask a follow-up, and this is not my field, but how do you find that? Like, what is the avenues that you take? Um, you know, I'm guessing it's not just like what's released on Amazon
No.
today, but right? Like how do you actually find that? Can you talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, this is a really important question, actually. Like, what we do is sort of actually a little bit nefarious. We have to kind of coax this material out of people, because a lot of it is like super, super, super advanced. I mean, generally speaking, I read books about 2 years before they come out, and sometimes they're in kind of rough shape, and it's my job to kind of see the like diamond in the rough kind of thing. But it's not always so easy to do it, because people don't necessarily want to share unedited or secret or unannounced material. But it's my job to be fast. It's my job to put my clients in an advantage. So the sooner I can get things, the better. So it's a lot of networking. It's a lot of like keeping your ear to the ground. It's a lot of like knowing the right people and the right questions to ask. There are, of course, official channels that people share books with me, and I get official submissions from agents, publishers, anyone you could possibly imagine. I probably get sent like 50 books per day that I'm not necessarily asking for, but the ones that I'm not necessarily asking for are not always the ones that I want. So I have to always go out and pound the pavement and try to find the thing that's actually going to be exciting.
That's interesting. What surprised you the most about your career?
Um, I think when I was in Philly and in school, I didn't know anyone in publishing, and it kind of felt like a city on a hill very far away. And moving to New York felt very intimidating and very impossible. And I guess I was surprised, not to make it all sound easy, because I've worked my face off for the past 15 years, basically, but it's, it's all very approachable if you're willing to put in the legwork. Like no one in publishing is ever going to come beat down your door and be like, please come work for me, here's a job. But if you put yourself out there and network with people, rarely do they shut the door on you. I mean, it is much more easy to penetrate than a lot of people say. And as far as living in New York goes, I never thought that was for me. I thought I would be miserable. And now I love living in New York. And it actually, when you don't live there, or at least this is how I felt, when you don't live there and you spend the day there or something, it drains you. Like you leave being like, oh my God, I have nothing left to give. I'm so tired. And I thought that by living there, I would feel like that all the time. But when you actually live there, it's the opposite. Like all that craziness kind of fills you up. And maybe that's like some weird damage or something, but that's how I feel about it now. And I could have never known that before.
Great. Okay, I want to shift gears a little bit, kind of going from some of your career to some actions that students should take. And as a reminder, if people want to put questions in the chat, we will get to them in just a little bit. But that, if you have a question, you don't have to hold it to the end. You can put it in the chat at any point. So Kelly, I'll ask you more about internships in just a second, but for now, what are 2 or 3 experiences that you would suggest students engage in while in college to help prepare them for entering your field?
Well, just to say like one thing about internships quickly, that's like a little tangential, but I think I did 2 internships while I was still at St. Joe's, or 2 or 3 that I think had nothing to do with books that actually helped me illuminate that that's what I actually did want to do. So sometimes doing an internship not in the field that you maybe are going to end up working in is just as helpful as like doing one that is, because it can help you. Just any real life work experience is going to really give you a lot of information about like what it is you're good at and what it is that you like and what it is that you don't like. But as far as interning in publishing and the things that you can do to set yourself up for success, remote internships, in-person internships, literally anything that you can do as far as if you can make inroads while you're still in college and make relationships while you're still in college, it's very likely that somebody's going to want to hire you, like basically the instant that you've graduated, if that's what you're doing while you're still in college within publishing, and you take those internships and you like them and you decide you do want to work in publishing, it's going to be really easy for you. And I think, again, we're in this unique moment where what I used to say to people is like, well, you have to come to New York for a summer, and now you don't anymore. I still think that so much of interning and what I learned from interning was actually showing up every day and being in the office with people and just like by osmosis picking things up. And so I think that that's like a little harder to do in a remote situation, but it's better. And I think also more cost effective and realistic for certain people to not have to like uproot themselves and move to New York for a summer just to do an unpaid internship or something. I think that the barrier to entry is even lower with that now too. So, I mean, maybe this is a bit of a wishy-washy answer, but the answer is just anything, do something, and any work experience is going to look good on a resume coming out of college, basically.
It's great advice. And for students that have been on for more than one of these, it echoes what another alum said earlier, that just doing stuff, even if it's not right, that experience that's not right is going to help you to figure out what is right. So sometimes that is the best outcome in an internship, is you realize it's not something that you want to do. Yeah. How did you get your first internship or job opportunity?
My first internship at St. Joe's, I believe, was working at Mainline Today magazine. And I think that I just cold applied. I don't think I knew anybody or anything. And that was something I really wanted to do because I was really interested in magazines at that point. And it didn't seem possible to get one at Philly Magazine or the Inquirer. But Mainline Today was really close to St. Joe's. So I was like, I really want to do that. And then I got that. And what I learned from that was how ephemeral magazines are. Like you're constantly writing something new and then it's going in the magazine that's done and then you're writing it again. And I didn't like how quick it was. I like one of the things that attracted me to working in books is how much like long they are in the pipeline and how much work goes into them. And then I think the second internship I did was actually on campus at the communications office, which was a blast also, but again, kind of gave me the same feeling of like doing press releases all the time and constantly doing like communication about the university. It was very like day in, day out, different thing. You know, I wanted to like work on a larger project. So I think the communications office, I think somebody in the English department put me up for that maybe. So again, things are different now. I think that like it's actually much easier to get internships now because it's like social media, they're posted. Oh, Dr. Spinner says it was her.
we have confirmation in real time.
That's funny. Hi, Dr. Spinner. Thank you for being here to be my external hard drive. But yeah, I think it's easier than ever. So many agencies and publishers are posting internships on their social media networks. And I just think like you don't have to like fill out a job application anymore. Like sometimes it's just as easy as having a conversation with someone and kind of getting in the door. So, and again, I can be a resource for that. I can point anybody in the direction of any of these things. I think sometimes publishing can be a little esoteric. If you don't know who the agencies are, who the publishers are, I can certainly tell you.
Great, really good advice. I have a question about interviewing. Can you provide one or two interview tips? And these can either be from your perspective of when you were a candidate for things, or I mean, with your own business, I'm sure you're interviewing folks. And are there pieces or items that you see interviewing wise that you feel really hit home and students should know about?
This is a weird answer, but I think I'm closer to the other side because I do interview people for my company. Actually, not that much because people haven't really left, thank goodness. But I have done a number of interviews over the years with lots of different people. I think it's really important to give an actual sense of yourself and an actual sense of your personality and an actual sense of what you're interested in. I think a lot of the advice that you get in college, especially, is like to go in seeming super professional, seeming like you know everything, putting your best foot forward. I actually think the best thing you can do is be like, these are the things I understand about what I'm interviewing for. These are the things I might not. This is who I actually am. Because I think, especially in a company of my size, which is pretty small, like everybody's personality, everybody's needs, everybody's quirks are felt. You can't hide for very long behind anything. So I'd rather somebody just tell me like, hey, I have no idea what this is, rather than like putting on a show or trying to seem like they're more prepared or more experienced than they are. I think that like you're doing everybody a favor, both yourself and them, by just giving a genuine sense of where you are. And that's not a deal breaker. If you don't have experience, if you don't know certain things, like then the person who's hiring you knows what they need to help you with or where you would fit in the company. So I think that's my like controversial advice, is to just be super transparent.
It's fantastic advice. Students, hopefully everybody realizes that the interview is about the fit, and once you get to the interview phase, you should 100% know that you're qualified, because employers don't interview candidates that are not qualified on their resumes, right? They look at them and say, this is a qualified person, we want to interview them. So it becomes all about fit. So Kelly, I think that's great advice. So moving on to the next question, two real keystones of a St. Joe's education include social justice and ethics. And can you talk a little bit about how this impacted you and your work or career decisions that you've made?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you'd actually be surprised at how many times within just like the small little niche of a world that I'm in, I have to make ethical choices. Not only as a small business owner, but like as a book scout. Like I think and I mean, just as people in the world, right, we're constantly being asked to make ethical choices. And I do think, I mean, I think back all the time to my education at St. Joe's and how spending those 4 years ensconced in an environment where we were constantly being reminded about social justice causes and how that has carried with me. You know, I think I all the time have to make choices about, like, if I have a sensitive material, you know, of a book, of something's in there that's either like sensitive in terms of the government, sensitive in terms of somebody's life, like, do I want to share this? Who do I want to share it with? And sometimes I have to err on the side of like not doing what's in the best interest of my clients, but doing what I think is like in the best interest of the person that wrote it or something else. You know, I think I can't always like serve the master of like my career. Sometimes I have to like think of the human side of it. I guess that's like kind of hard to talk about without like giving a concrete example, but I guess like especially with journalism and investigative journalism, like a lot of times people are writing about other people who, like, you know, Chelsea Manning or someone, like there's like international implications, or people could be put into danger by things within a book getting out before the time they're supposed to come out. So I have to make those calls a lot. Right now, something that's being asked of me in my career that is tough is I have a client in Russia. I actually scout for the biggest publisher in Russia. And earlier today, I had a long conversation with them about what's going on there. And a lot of people have come to me and been like, don't you feel morally compromised by being on the payroll of a Russian publisher? And I mean, my actual answer is no, because the people that I work for there, it's a private company and they're being victimized by everything that's going on. Like, they didn't choose to have Putin invade Ukraine. So, you know, my ethics are leading me toward like, I'm helping them by continuing to work for them in a weird roundabout way. Like, these are people I've worked with for 5 years, who I have a really strong relationship with, and I don't want to abandon them because they're going through something difficult. So, you know, I have to, and also just as a business owner and taking care of my employees, like through the pandemic, it was like, well, are you going to lay everybody off? Like, I was like, absolutely not. You know, I'm going to wait and see what happens. And then everything turned out to be fine. So, you know, it's just constant decisions that you have to make. And it's good to have some kind of internal compass to be able to do that.
Those are some really solid examples. Thank you for sharing them. I have two last questions. They're kind of wrap-up questions, and then there's definitely some questions waiting for us in the chat. So, what is something that you wish someone had told you while you were in school?
I wish that someone had told me how many jobs you can get with an English major. I think that it's definitely changing now, but I think back when I was there, the conventional wisdom was like, you can be a writer, you can be a teacher, or you can be a lawyer, were like the main ones. And with some other things sprinkled in there, but it's actually like really wide. You know, I could name 20 more things without really missing a beat. So by being an English major, it's a good foundation for lots of different things. And then it's up to you to figure out what you're going to do with that. But I wish that people had exposed me to more things. And I'm sure I would have still made the choices that I made. And I think I'm in the right career for myself. But it was really shocking to come out and find out about all of these other careers that I really had never thought about before.
That's great. And then I guess the opposite of that, beyond just how diverse careers can be, what's a piece of advice you would give to students who are interested in maybe a similar path?
My advice would be to start interning as soon as possible. Another thing that comes up a lot, and I'm sure this might come up in some of the follow-up questions, is if you want to be a writer, don't work in publishing. Like, I think that a lot of people think that you can kind of back channel into getting a book deal or something like that. That's bad advice. Stay away from that. If you want to be a writer, hit that hard in the other direction. If you want to work in books, start tomorrow trying to get an internship and set yourself up for when you graduate, and you will be fine. And even if you don't do an internship in college, you'll still be fine. It just might take a little bit more networking and elbow grease later down the road, but just know that it's eminently possible. And like I said, read a lot of books that are not like dead people.
All right, so let's get into some of the questions. And since you just mentioned internships, and I'm not going to take these in the exact order, a question was asked basically, that not all students can afford unpaid internships. Can you talk a little bit about getting paid opportunities?
Yeah, I mean, there are more and more. I think publishing has gotten in trouble for doing unpaid internships, basically, and I think at the like high level, looking down, I'd say that it's like much more possible to find paid opportunities than ever before. But even back in 2009, when I started, I had a paid internship out of college, which is what allowed me to move to New York in the first place. So my other advice would be is if somebody is offering you an unpaid internship, tell them no and ask for money. So, and like, I mean, they kind of have to give it to you. I think it's basically considered to be illegal at this point to do unpaid internships. So stand up for yourself and ask for something, because it can go a long way.
It's great. Yeah, a lot has definitely changed. So Ryan Daly asks, and this goes a little bit back to earlier when you talked about finding, books. How do you find books that haven't been published? Are they mailed to you? Is it more complicated? And you definitely talked through a few of the channels that you take, but maybe shed a little bit more light there.
I mean, everything's done over email. Books are submitted to publishers by literary agents. So once a writer hooks up with a literary agent, they're represented by the literary agent. Then the literary agent sends their material to foreign publishers, scouts, publishers in New York. And publishing is a small world. So basically things get passed around and then I intercept them. And not always, like I said, a lot of things are just emailed to me as a matter of course, because I'm someone that they want to talk to in order to help sell the rights to their book. So it's a variety of things, but the days are gone of mailing manuscripts in the mail or faxing them or any of that stuff. That was, I think, just on its way out basically when I started in scouting, more or less. But yeah, now everything is just email attachments galore.
Great. Okay, so Nikki Palladino, who I believe from saying hi earlier in the chat, she asked a question about shopping all genres. And can you talk a little bit about how writers get their pieces in front of publishers or scouts if they don't have an agent?
I mean, yeah, if I think the channels that you would explore to get representation or to get a book deal vary widely, like for each different genre. I think that's what Nikki's getting at. Like if you're a journalist and you want to write nonfiction, you need to like have a job at a newspaper or be writing freelance pieces on the regular, or become an expert in something and blog about it, or sometimes it's like posting on Instagram or whatever. So nonfiction is its own thing, and it takes a number of different you know different like iterations from there. As far as fiction goes, I mean, the classic things that people say are like get published in literary journals, go to your MFA and network that way, or write a novel. That's true, but it's just as true that you can like just write a novel by yourself that no one's ever seen and query agents, and maybe somebody will pick you up that way. So I think it's really what people are comfortable with, and it's also like it depends on what you're actually writing. But if you're writing in a genre like, let's say, romance or sci-fi or even literary fiction or something like that, it's good to like network with other people that are writing similar things to you, either like online or in person, or like as part of a book group or as part of an MFA thing or a grad program or what have you, because I find that a lot of the road to getting representation is through like writers recommending other writers to their agents who are like writing similar things. So if you have an area that you want to become a writer in, I would say find the other people that are doing it and work together.
So networking works is a big part of what I just heard.
Actually,
That's great.
AWP was in Philly this year. I don't know if anyone knows what that is, but it was like last week. It's like the big like literary journals and writers and everybody like has a convention. Basically, it's like a big throng of writers come together once a year, both famous ones and wannabes and everybody. And it was in Philly last week. So Jenny, she says you two guys went, so they will let you know this.
Kelly, you just mentioned social media and you mentioned Instagram. Can you talk about just social media in general and how it kind of can either help or hurt somebody wanting to get into the field?
Yeah, this is probably like a whole another Zoom call, but I mean, I think in general, like Twitter has become a really big thing for writers trying to break out. And even once they have a book deal, like they're expected to be like tweeting all the time. And if you're invisible online, like publishers find that to be a little bit suspect, or they think that it's going to be like harder to make your book work. I don't know about all this. I see a lot of people that are like supposed to be writing all the time, tweeting all the time. I'm like, why are you giving away your material for free on Twitter? You know, like you're writing good stuff, go write it in a book. But I understand the world we're in is like, that's how you gain notoriety. That's how people know who you are. So a lot of like the younger contemporary writers are like big Twitter personalities. And so I think it cuts both ways, because I think you lose some mystique, and sometimes you just talk too much or waste time or whatever. And I think it's a little like it's speaking to the same audience if it's like you follow a lot of writers and you're a writer and all that stuff. So it's tricky. I don't know, but I think probably it's better to err on the side of like having a presence online if you want to be a writer.
Great. If folks in the audience have more questions, please put them either into the chat or you can raise your hand. There was a question I didn't get to here. Kevin asks, as someone interested in writing, do you notice certain patterns within the works that are chosen for publication?
Great question. The answer is no. Like, I think that any rules should be broken, and the more different things we can see, the better. And like, I love seeing things that are just truly weird, imaginative things that have come out of a unique mind. And I actually like that much better than something that's formulaic and reminds me of 20 other bestsellers. So I think that anybody that gives you rules about what you should write or you shouldn't write, don't listen to them. I think things that are weird and maybe that don't appear to be like any current bestsellers might have a harder road to getting published. But, I think writing is meant to be very unique and very like progressive all the time. So I think hold on to that.
Great. And I see Kevin, who asked the questions, cameras on, and was definitely taking that in. So that's great. Sarah asks, what personality traits are a fit for your line of work?
I think people that are, for scouting specifically, if you aren't like, if you're shy, you're gonna have a really hard time, because I have to like ask people for things all the time. And I have to like really be very decisive and very like sure of my own opinions and all those things. So I find that people that maybe are a little bit more like introverted do better in other parts of publishing. And certainly there are plenty of introverts in publishing who thrive and do really well, but mine is like super social and super forward facing. So that would not be for you necessarily. I think honestly having a kind of big personality will probably get you farther in scouting than being an amazing reader, to be perfectly honest with you. It's a lot of talking.
Great. So another question came in from Dominica. I hope I said your name right. I see a head shaking yes. Do you feel like unmuting and asking, or would you like me to ask it?
I don't mind asking.
Okay, great.
So what types of things do people like yourself in the publishing industry or the scouting industry typically look for on resumes or cover letters that would make them a strong candidate?
I honestly like, this is probably again a terrible answer. Like, I don't need to see anything particular on a resume. The thing that I look for is a reader's report writing sample. Like, I don't care if you're coming at me having worked at 4 other scouting offices, or if you've like worked at Barnes and Noble, or if you've worked at like TGI Fridays. I need to know that you can read a book in the way that like the market needs you to read a book. So I don't know. I would say I would devalue that a little bit. Anything in life can give you good experience for any kind of job. Honestly, I lean more on my waitressing experience than anything else in my career now. So, but as far as like putting a resume together, I mean, you want to see that people are working. You want to see that they've like done things. I don't really care what the things are, but I think for me, a red flag is someone who's gone to a lot of school, but has not actually worked. Like people that are very like highly degreed, you know, I think coming out of like a very academic world where you don't have a lot of like real life experience would be something that I would shy away from.
So Kelly, I'm going to ask a follow-up because you said that you go back to your waitressing experience, and I know in the Career Center we talk to students a lot about those types of jobs that they've done, right? Maybe it's waiter or waitress or a camp counselor or a lifeguard, and how much experience that can be, right? It's not just the job and the responsibilities within that job, but it's all the things that came into play from it. And you did just say that that you go back to that a lot. So can you talk to, this far into your career, why has that been the case?
It's where waitressing is where I learned to multitask, first of all. It's where I learned to keep like 7 different things in my head at all times and like be running around and like holding a milkshake, but also like thinking about like something somebody told me 30 seconds ago. And also it's where I learned a very invaluable skill, which is like how to look at someone's face when they're being mean to me and smile and then give them what they're asking for, even though I think that they're wrong or they're not being polite to me or whatever, but just kind of brushing it off, solving the problem and moving on. And as a waitress, you do that about 15 times an hour. And in my job as a scout, I do that about 15 times an hour. So just always keeping things moving, never really like letting the milkshake drop, and like just never stopping to be like, shit, what was I doing now? Like you just kind of always are in a flow of like accomplishing multiple things at once.
Fantastic advice, and really just to be able to take something like that from a waitressing position. I mean, that's students that are on this Zoom right now. If you've had any experiences like that, make sure that you figure out what are the transferable skills, what are the life skills that I've learned in these roles, and how can I really utilize them. So that was great. We are getting close to time. So is there anybody that wants to ask a last question, or are we good? All right, I'm going to take silence as us being good. So Kelly, thank you so much for joining us today, providing this really just great insight into your career. I think it was so helpful. We're grateful for your time and hope to see you back on Hawk Hill sometime soon, hopefully in person. Just a reminder to everybody that we will be posting this video to YouTube probably early next week, and we have a few more sessions throughout the day today. So thank you so much, everyone.
Thank
Thanks,
you guys.
Callie.